Hello friends, welcome to YourPedia, and as you know, we have started a series where we will be discussing with you a few topics from the environment section for this exam, which you know already that Coal India Limited has released some of the posts for management trainee, that is a computer based test, right. So from the environmental section, so we will be taking up almost on regular basis a few topics from this area. So let's go ahead with that. So from the environmental section, the topic that I have taken today is basically there are two topics which you can say they are somehow related or related to same thing. One is the polluter pays principle and the other one is the precautionary principle. So both of these topics we are going to discuss, and at the end of the video I will be based upon the whatever we have discussed, I will be discussing with you a few questions, okay, on the same lines which you can expect on the examination, okay. So let us first see what is this principle talk about, okay. So as the name suggests, as you can just see that it says that polluter pays principle. So it means polluter pays, that means the entity, organization or the party who basically pollutes the environment, that entity should pay for that pollution, because you know in the recent times we have been facing a lot of threats because of the environmental pollution. Not only we are facing health challenges, but also you know we are having a global challenge in the form of global warming, greenhouse gases releasing into the environment, and it has caused a threat which is culminating in the form of a climate change, which is a very serious threat for us. Now what to do to tackle this issue? So that is why we are taking different steps in order to reduce the release of those gases or those pollutants into the environment. So one of those principles or one of those approaches which is adopted is this one, which we call as a polluter pays principle. So this rule says that whosoever is responsible for polluting the environment, he should be made to pay for that because obviously it is going to have a cost related to it. For example, if you are polluting the environment, it is getting released into the environment, and now you are having a threat of climate change. So how to contain that climate change? How to reduce the effect of that? So you need to invest a huge amount of money. So it means there is a cost involved when you pollute the environment, or rather say, let's say you are having a health challenges that you are facing. So the person who is polluting the environment is someone different. He is different, whereas those persons who are facing the consequences, they may be different. For example, think of a situation, let's say I have a company which manufactures something. So I am manufacturing something, at the same time to manufacture that thing I am polluting the environment. So what I am doing is, I am getting the benefit of like by selling those products, but I am releasing those pollutants into the environment, and other people who are not in any case related to that, they are getting affected. So basically the cost is involved, so I should be made responsible for the pollution that I am making. So I should be made to internalize that cost. As of now, what I am doing, I am producing it and I am externalizing. That cost involved in damaging the environment, all of us has to pay, or the cost involved in damaging your health, so you have to pay for that, whereas I am responsible for that. So what we need to do is we need to make those entity responsible for internalizing that cost. Internalizing means that I should, while manufacturing that product, I should take due care so that I don't release that pollutant into the environment. If I release that pollutant in the environment, then I should bear that cost, so that the harmful impact of those that particular this pollutant or pollution can be avoided. Same thing you can take an example of. For example, let's say you are driving a car. So what you are doing? You are paying for the fuel, but you are not paying for the pollution that you are causing by burning that fuel in your car. So what you are doing is you are externalizing that cost. Someone who is inhaling that pollutant, he is getting sick, so he is paying for that, whereas you are paying only for the fuel part. So what you need to do is you have to make it internalized. That means the person who is not only paying for the fuel, he should also be made responsible to pay for the pollution that he is generating and the harmful impact of that. So it should act as a deterrent, so that people should try to reduce the pollutants that they are getting released into the environment, okay. So that is the basic, you can say, philosophy behind the polluter pays principle. So in environmental laws, the polluter pays principle is enacted to make the party mean whether it is a person or whether it is a company, organization, manufacturer, responsible for producing pollution, responsible for paying the damage done to the natural environment. So not only producing the pollution, but because of that, whatever the damage is happening, you should be made responsible for that. So basically this principle came into limelight in 1970s. So we'll discuss it at a later stage. So and now, so the basic concept is that as of now, the producer is externalizing that cost. Example I quoted you, you are making the pollution and you are just throwing it out. So other people are suffering. So as of now, you are externalizing the cost of that particular activity. Now, for example, I take the example of factory also and all that. Same is the example that you can quote for the, let's say, automotive driver, or let us say you are having a car, you are driving the car, so you are releasing the pollution and all that. So all that example I discussed with you. So we need to make it internalized. The person who is releasing the pollutant, he should be made responsible. Therefore, internalizing the cost is kind of a deterrent for him. According to the purpose for many environmental regulation is to force the polluters to bear the real cost of their pollution. So this is a theme basically. What is the purpose of this? Why we are saying that make it internalize that cost? So that you can force that polluter to bear the real cost of the pollution, because sometimes we cannot even calculate the net effect of those pollutants which are released into the environment, damaging effects of into the environment. So we have to estimate that cost and therefore make them responsible for that. In theory, such measures encourage producers of pollution to make cleaner products and to use a cleaner. For example, let's say if I am releasing the pollutants in the environment, so if I have to pay the cost for that, then what I will try to do? I will try to reduce that pollution. I will try to make those products in such a way that the total pollutants getting released into the environment get reduced. So that way I am also spending over there in the new technologies, so that overall pollution into the environment gets reduced. That is the meaning of this. So if you put some kind of like you have to pay for something, then obviously we will try to take the measure to reduce that particular pollutant. So that is why what this pollution, this polluter pays principle says. And first time that this factual information is important from exam point of view. That first time it was basically introduced in 1972 by an organization which we used to call it as a Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So they basically highlighted, or they basically introduced it. Again, the purpose was same, so as to environmental damage could be reduced. And at later stage, as you know, as the environmental meets or environmental meetings started taking place at the international level. So in those environmental meetings, we started taking up those measures, and these principles were basically enshrined on those meetings also, on those declarations also. If you can somehow relate that the first global meet on the environmental related issues was convened by the United Nations in 1972. We call it as a Stockholm Conference. And then 1986 there was a Brundtland Commission, and then in 1992 we were having a major meet, environmental meet, basically organized by the United Nations. Basically all these meetings and all those things you study in the greenhouse gas emissions and related to that. There in any case you have to remember all those chronology and all that. There you study about that. But one of the major meet related to the environment is the Rio Earth Summit. Basically it was 20 years after the Stockholm Conference which took place in 1972. In 1992 we call it as a Rio Earth Summit also we call it. Sometimes we also call it as a Rio Declaration. So most popularly it is known as a Earth Summit. Summit means a meeting of all the nations that took place over there at Rio de Janeiro. This is a city in Brazil. So there this meeting took place, and therefore it came to be known as Rio Earth Summit. And after the meeting they came out with some declaration, and one of those declaration, in that declaration they had mentioned very clearly this principle of polluter pays principle. So first time who introduced this one, and then at later stage it was in 1992 it was enshrined in the Rio Declaration also. That is what is mentioned over here. So this information we need to remember. So in furtherance of the aim of sustainable development which was highlighted in the Rio Declaration, principle. Now important is it is mentioned under the principle 16 of this Rio Declaration, where it says and basically enshrines or lists down these principles, stating that polluter should bear the cost of pollution. As simple as that. So this factual information you should be very clear. So this page is basically their home page from where I have taken. This is this Rio Earth Summit is also known as United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. We call it as a UNCED also, that you will study in that particular greenhouse gas emissions and all related to global warming and all that. But this was the introductory line and all that. But I am not concerned with that. This is just to make you know that okay, it was the declaration part, and at the there under the principle. So there are different principle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and all that. So under principle 16 they mentioned this. So in principle 16, see what they are mentioning, same thing what we discussed, that national authorities should endeavor, try to promote the internalize the environmental costs and the use of economic instruments, taking into account the approach that polluter should in principle, right, should be made responsible for that pollution and should bear the cost of pollution with due regard to the public interest. And obviously, so someone is polluting and some other is getting harmed because of that pollution. So make it internalize. Internalize mean make that party responsible who is producing that pollution. Okay. In addition to it, because this there is one more principle that is not related to this, but since they are like close to each other, 16 and this is a 17 number, I have highlighted it. This is related to environmental impact assessment. Now environmental impact assessment is another topic, very major topic in your this environmental section, and that we will be discussing in detail about the different aspect of that. But you should also remember that under which principle of Rio Declaration this environmental impact assessment has been mentioned. So they have clearly mentioned as a that countries should adopt this approach of this environmental impact assessment, where your projects can create a lot of harm to the environment, directly or indirectly. So that part we will be discussing over there, but over here just remember that it has been enshrined under the principle 17 of the Rio Declaration, even though this is not directly related to this. Now what should we do, how you have to pay? This part deals with that how you should make it pay. One part you are saying okay, make polluter responsible for paying that particular for the pollution he is making, but how he should pay? You should have some kind of mechanism, right? So that mechanism is mentioned over here. That mechanism is through carbon tax or emission trading system. You just need to overall understand what is the meaning of carbon tax. Basically in terms of carbon pricing. For example, in a very layman term, if I ask you, for example, carbon tax mean or carbon pricing mean, it is not simply carbon, it means carbon dioxide, because let's say it is equivalent to the carbon dioxide. Let's say you are releasing 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So if you are releasing 1 ton of carbon dioxide into the environment, so for releasing that much amount of carbon dioxide in the environment, how much should you pay? As simple as that, right? So you could have different ways of doing that. So one of the method of like making it pay is direct, like, so carbon price is simply the price that you have to pay for releasing a certain amount of, let's say, greenhouse gas into the environment. We called it as a carbon price. Now how you can do it? You are having two policy instruments. One we call it as a carbon price based mechanism in the form of carbon tax. So either you impose the carbon tax, one form of carbon pricing. Carbon pricing is a general term. So under the carbon pricing, so how you can implement that, how you can that make polluter pay for that? One is that carbon tax. So just impose the tax on that carbon dioxide, or you can say greenhouse gas that you are releasing into the environment. So let us say if you are releasing 1 ton of greenhouse gas into the environment, okay, so impose the carbon tax on that. Let's say you have to pay this much amount if you release 1 ton of greenhouse gas into the environment. As simple as that. This becomes straightforward way. So one is like carbon tax. So you may ask that if he has released, what is the purpose of just imposing the tax? Because you have already made the environment, you have already polluted the environment. But we are saying by imposing the tax, basically it is putting deterrence on you, that it is a kind of a punishment for that polluter, that he will think twice, should he pay carbon tax or should he implement those technologies which can reduce the carbon dioxide, or more specifically greenhouse gases. So that way those manufacturers or those entities will start thinking, and will try to implement those measures so that they will release less pollution into the environment. So this is a direct way where the price of the pollution is determined by the rate of tax for each ton of greenhouse gas emitted. As simple as that. This is one way. Second way is what we call it as a cap and trade mechanism, or we also call it as a emission trading system. So in this what we do is cap and trade और emission trading system. Trading mean जिसको हम खरीद फरोख्त बोलते हैं, खरीदना और बेचना, simple term में. So what we are doing over here in this mechanism is we also call it as cap and trade. So we put a cap or limit. Okay, what do? You put a limit that okay, these organizations, let's say you are having two organizations, so you put a cap. Okay, you cannot produce more than this carbon dioxide, this much unit of carbon, this greenhouse gas. Same is you have put a limit on the other this entity also. So let's say on one entity you are saying that okay, 5 units of this, and on other entity you are saying 5 units of this, right? So this is the cap limit that you have imposed and you have given the target. Now one entity it may happen that this entity may not be able to produce may not be able to reduce the carbon dioxide equivalents that is of 5 units, whereas this entity may be able to reduce more. So let us say instead of 5, even though they have been given the target of 5, they are able to reduce by 7 units of those greenhouse gas emissions, whereas this is only able to reduce, let us say, by 3. So if they have to meet their target, what they can do, this organization can purchase the 2 excess units from here. So by purchasing from here, what is happening is this is also able to meet its target, this is also able to meet its target. So what is happening is this organization is purchasing 2 units from the other organization who has met its target in excess. So that way what is happening is we are basically trying to limit the amount of carbon this greenhouse gases can be released into the market. How? Because they are exceeding the target. So in any case they have to pay for that. They have to pay for that. They are not getting free. When they will purchase from them excess 2, they have to pay for that. So when they have to pay for that, then there is a kind of deterrence for them. They have to pay for equivalent to the 5 units of that greenhouse gas emissions that they are the target that is given to them, right? So this is how basically this mechanism operates. So you need to have the idea that what is the mechanism. So on this sets a cap or limit on the maximum level of emission given for a given period of time. Obviously time period you need to mention, and distribute permits or allowances for each unit that I gave you, that you gave the units of 5 and among the firms that produce the emissions. So some firms they find it cheaper to reduce the emissions. Now why this is done this way? Because in one organization it may be easy for you to reduce those number of units, whereas for other organizations it may be difficult because you may have to invest more money. So that way, in order to fulfill that objective, you can go carry out the trade, and that is how. So polluters have paid through the ensuring that they have enough permits and all that. Okay, anyway. So point is, when you are giving the target, that means you will try to limit your pollution into the environment, and this mechanism you can follow this. So you need to have the idea that okay, under polluter pays principles, what are the different ways through which you can try to meet your targets and all those. So the kind of deterrence, how you can meet the deterrence. One is through the carbon tax, which we are calling as a carbon tax. The other one is the emission trading system and cap and trade mechanism. Okay, this is the first principle and the basic information that you need to have about it. Now second principle that we need to talk about is precautionary principle. Now again, go to the basic terminology part. What does it say? Precautionary. Now precautionary means you have to take precaution. Now I will read this statement, then from there you will get the idea what is the meaning of precautionary. See what it says. This principle says that if there is a strong suspicion, आपको doubt है, you are having a strong doubt that when you will carry out a certain activity may have environmental harmful consequences. Let's say I want to put up a project somewhere. So I know that I have a strong doubt that that project can lead to a serious environmental consequences. That is the meaning of it. Harmful impact. It is better to control that activity. So I should not go ahead with that activity. I should try to control that activity, try to limit its impact in the environment, rather than waiting for a time where I can 100%, it is better to control that activity now, abhi usko control, rather than to wait for incontrovertible scientific evidence. See, we are talking from the perspective of doubt. I am having the doubt that this can lead to a environmental damage. So even if I am having a doubt, I should not go ahead with that activity. That is the meaning of it. Rather than wait that, okay, once I will implement that activity, and when I will have a solid proof that, okay, yes, it is causing the damage or it will cause the damage. So I should not wait till that time, because if I will wait till that time that this activity will cause the damage to the environment or it has caused the environment. By the time everything has gone, you have already damaged the environment. So I should not wait for the proof that, okay, this activity is definitely going to damage the environment. Rather, even if I am having a doubt, strong doubt that this can lead to, I should try to take the steps and try to contain that activity, try to restrict that activity at the very initial step. So that is the meaning of this. So this principally expressed in, now this is the part that what it says. Now it means precaution. So that is why I said that, okay, from here you will get the meaning of precautionary. So what you are doing is basically, even if you have doubt, you are trying to take the precaution, not going ahead with that particular activity. Okay, that is the meaning of this. The principle is expressed now, like we talked about the polluter pays principle, which is enshrined in the this chapter, this principle 16 of the Rio Declaration. Same way, this principle has also been enshrined in the one of the principle rather 15 of the Rio Declaration, right? That is what, and it says they see where these are the wordings which have been used in the principle 15. Threats, wherever there are serious threats or irreversible damage, lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used. Jahan par bhi, wherever you have a serious doubt that it is going to cause a irreversible damage. So lack of full scientific uncertainty. Scientifically you cannot prove that definitely it is going to cause. So you should not wait for that scientific proof, right? Not be used. That should not be used as a reason for postponing the cost-effective measure to prevent the environmental degradation, right? So you should postpone. Matlab you can delay that activity. You can either you delay that activity, or maybe if you are having alternative approaches, you should go ahead with that. That is the meaning of. So that means even if you have to doubt, you should not go ahead with that activity because it can cause a serious damage by the time you came to know that, okay, oh, definitely it will cause the damage. So you should not wait for that proof. Precautionary principle proposed as a new guideline in the environmental decision making general. So it is having 4 central components. One is taking preventive action. Obviously, when you have uncertainty, you are not sure whether it will cause, not cause, it may cause, take preventive measure. Shifting the burden of proof. Who is going to prove? Shift the burden of proof to the person who is going ahead with that activity. So he has to prove, that entity has to prove that whether that will cause the damage to the environment or not. So that is another approach, or you can say central principle. Exploring wide range of alternatives. So look for the different alternatives if you think that, okay, it can cause harmful impact. What is the other alternative? What is the other way of carrying out that activity? Increasing public participation in decision making, because if you bring the people together, they can give you so many different ideas when you're going ahead with that activity. So if you make them part of those decision making, particularly in the major projects, for example, let's say if you're carrying out some activity in the forest area. So people living over there have some basic knowledge, and I think if you involve those people, you could have a better decision making. That is the meaning of this. So this is the precautionary principle, and over here the same has been mentioned as I told you. Principle 15, again the same lines which I discussed over there with you, and which have been enshrined on the, so you should remember the principle 15 of precautionary principle. Okay, so these are the 2 major areas, you can say, of this topic which is mentioned over there in your environmental section. So now we will, based upon whatever we have discussed, we will go ahead and discuss a few questions. Okay, let's check your understanding, what you have understood till now. Okay, so if we go through this, polluter pays principle was first time introduced by. So which of these organizations introduced first time? So if you can recall, I mentioned it was first time introduced by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in 1972. So it was OECD that had introduced in 1972 this principle, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But at later on, it was also enshrined in the Rio Declaration because because see, Organization for Economic and Cooperation and Development, it is not an environmental organization or environmental meetings or meets that takes place globally. So even though they mentioned that time, they realized this, but it is basically this role has to be played by the some kind of meetings which are related to environment. That is why environmental meet was Rio was the environmental meet. So that is why it is more important for us that it should have been mentioned over there, right? So this is how. So this is going to be the answer. Let's go to the next one. Which principle of Rio Declaration enshrines the polluter pays principle? So clearly, if you can recall, I mentioned over there two principles. So principle 16 is the under the Rio Declaration. That is under the Rio Declaration. Principle 16 mentions about the polluter pays principle. So this is a factual information. You need to remember this. If you will remember directly, straightforward question will be framed. So you can go ahead. So D is going to be the answer. Just read this statement and try to answer. What it says: under which system limit is set on the maximum level of emissions for a given time period and distributes permits and allowances for each unit of greenhouse gas among firms that produce emissions. If you remember, I had told you over there that you put a cap for each organization. You say that okay, you cannot release the greenhouse gas emissions corresponding that is more than the 5 units, whatever units that you have prepared, or permits equivalent to 5 units. Same way for others also. So this was what in the polluter pays principle, because we are making these organizations responsible for releasing that greenhouse gases into the environment. So basically it was not the emission trading system, but I think it was sets the limit. So it sets the limit, yes, under which system you are having. One was the carbon tax, where you are inputting the direct tax on that particular amount of carbon dioxide, amount of greenhouse gases you are releasing into the environment. The other one system was the cap and trade, or we also gave it a name called as emission trading system. So either it is the emission trading system or cap and trade. Cap and trade means put a limit and then you can just trade among yourself. That is the meaning of it. So it was the, I think, A, right? So that we discussed over there. So let's now go to the next one. Principle 17 of Rio Declaration deals with. So if you have watched this clearly, this video, then you will recall that I spoke that principle 16 is related to the polluter pays principle, but one more principle I just mentioned over there, that is the principle 17, even though it is not related to this, but it is related to the environmental impact assessment, which we are going to discuss somewhere else. But you have to remember this principle, because definitely straightforward question you can frame. So under the Rio Declaration, principle 17 deals with the environmental impact assessment. D is going to the, just go through this one now. So which principle requires that if there is a strong suspicion that a certain activity may have environmentally harmful consequences, it is better to control that activity rather than to wait for incontroverted cycle. What does it mean? It simply says that okay, if you have doubt that this activity can cause a harm to the environment, though instead of waiting for the proof that this will definitely cause the environmental damage, you should not wait for that proof. Rather, if you have doubt, significant doubt, don't go ahead with that particular activity or look for some alternatives. So that is the what? That is a precautionary principle. You have to take the precaution in implementing that particular project or activity. So this is the C. And then see this one, which principle of Rio Declaration enshrines the precautionary principle? Recall it. So I just spoke to you, I talk about the principle 15, 16, 17. 16 polluter pays principle, 17 environmental impact assessment, 15 was related to precautionary principle. So it is a 16. Principle 15 was related to that, so it is a B. So I think that is all. So that way, through these questions, I think whatever we had discussed, almost I have revised the whole thing. So that way I think any question which is framed from this section, you will be in a better position to handle this. So I think that is all from my side today. We are coming up with the regular videos on different topics of these sections. So we'll see you in the next section or next video. Till then, bye. Thank you.